Okay, we're back with the magician's nephew today. We're in chapter 2, and this one is called Diggory and His Uncle. And Diggory has just asked about Polly being sent to somewhere else. So his uncle says, "How do you harp on that? And if that was what mattered, my first task was, of course, to study the box itself. It was very ancient, and I knew enough even then to know that it wasn't Greek or Old Egyptian or Babylonian or Hittite or Chinese. It was older than any of those nations. Ah, that was a great day when I at last found out the truth. The box was Atlantean. It came from the lost island of Atlantis. That meant it was centuries older than any of the Stone Age things they dig up in Europe. And it wasn't a rough, crude thing like them either. For in the very dawn of time, Atlantis was already a great city, with palaces and temples and learned men." He paused for a moment as if he expected Diggory to say something, but Diggory was disliking his uncle more every minute, so he said nothing. "Meanwhile," continued Uncle Andrew, "I was learning a good deal in other ways. It wouldn't be proper to explain them to a child, about magic in general. That meant that I came to have a fair idea what sorts of things might be in the box. By various tests, I narrowed down the possibilities. I had to get to know some devilish queer people and go through some very disagreeable experiences. That was what turned my head gray. One doesn't become a magician for nothing. My health broke down in the end, but I got better, and at last I actually knew." Although there was not really the least chance of anyone overhearing them, he leaned forward and almost whispered as he said, "The Atlantean box contained something that had been brought for another world when our world was only just beginning." "What?" asked Diggory, who was now interested in spite of himself. "Only dust," said Uncle Andrew. "Fine, dry dust. Nothing much to look at. Not much to show for a lifetime of toil, you might say. Ah, but when I looked at that dust, I took jolly good care not to touch it, and thought that every grain had once been in another world. I don't mean another planet. You know, they're part of our world, and you could get to them if you went far enough, but a really other world, another nature, another universe somewhere you would never reach, even if you traveled through this space of this universe forever and ever, a world that could only be reached by magic. Well," here Uncle Andrew rubbed his hands till his knuckles cracked like fireworks. "I knew," he went on, "that if only you could get it into the right form, that dust would draw you back to the place it had come from. But the difficulty was to get it into the right form. My earlier experiments were all failures. I tried them on guinea pigs. Some of them only died. Some exploded like little bombs. It was a jolly cruel thing to do," said Diggory, who had once had a guinea pig of his own. "How do you keep getting off the point?" said Uncle Andrew. "That's what the creatures were for. I bought them myself. Let me see, where was I? Ah, yes. At last I succeeded in making the rings, the yellow rings. But now a new difficulty arose. I was pretty sure now that the yellow ring would send any creature that touched it into the other place. But what would be the good of that if I couldn't get them back to tell me what they had found there?" "And what about them?" said Diggory. A nice mess they'd be in if they couldn't get back." "You will keep on looking at everything from the wrong point of view," said Uncle Andrew with a look of impatience. "Can't you understand the whole thing is an experiment? The whole point of sending anyone into the other place is that I want to find out what it's like. Well, why didn't you go yourself then? Diggory had hardly ever seen anyone look so surprised and offended as his uncle did at this simple question. Me? Me? He exclaimed. The boy must be mad. A man at my time of life and at my state of health to risk the shock and the dangers of being flung suddenly into a different universe? I never heard anything so preposterous in my life. Do you realize what you're saying? Think what another world means. You might meet anything. Anything. And I suppose you've sent Polly into them, said Diggory. His cheeks were flaming with anger now. And all I can say, he added, even if you are my uncle, is that you've behaved like a coward, sending a girl to a place that you're afraid to go yourself. And here's a picture of his Uncle Diggory. I think you can see it down there at the bottom. Silence, sir, said Uncle Andrew, bringing his hand down on the table. I will not be talked to like that by a little dirty schoolboy. You don't understand. I am the great scholar, the magician, the adept who is doing the experiment. Of course I need subjects to do it on. Bless my soul. You'll be telling me next that I ought to have asked the guinea pigs permission before I use them. No great wisdom can be reached without sacrifice, but the idea of going myself is ridiculous. It's like asking a general to fight as a common soldier. Supposing I got killed, what would become of my life's work? Oh, do stop jawing, said Diggory. Are you going to bring Polly back? I was going to tell you when you so rudely interrupted me, said Uncle Andrew, that I did at last find out a way of doing the return journey. The green rings draw you back. But Polly hasn't got a green ring. No, said Uncle Andrew with a cruel smile. Then she can't get back, shouted Diggory. And it's exactly the same as if you'd murdered her. She can get back, said Uncle Andrew, if someone else will go after her, wearing a yellow ring himself and taking 2 green rings, one to bring himself back and one to bring her back. And now, of course, Diggory saw the trap in which he was caught, and he stared at Uncle Andrew, saying nothing, with his mouth wide open. His cheeks had gone very pale. I hope, said Uncle Andrew presently in a very high and mighty voice, just as if he were a perfect uncle who had given one a handsome tip and some good advice. I hope, Diggory, you are not given to showing the white feather. I should be very sorry to think that any one of our family had not enough honor and chivalry to go to the aid of a lady in distress. Oh, shut up, said Diggory. If you had any honor and all that, you'd probably be going yourself. But I know you won't. All right, I see. I've got to go. But you are a beast. I suppose you planned the whole thing so that she'd go without knowing it and that I'd have to go after her. Of course, said Uncle Andrew with his hateful smile. Very well, I'll go. But there's one thing I jolly well mean to say first. I didn't believe in magic till today. I see now it's real. Well, if it is, I suppose all the old fairy tales are more or less true, and you're simply a wicked, cruel magician like the ones in the story. Well, I've never read a story in which people of that sort weren't paid out in the end, and I bet you will be, and serve you right. So I'm going to stop right there. There's a couple more pages left in the chapter, but we'll do those another time. Love you. Bye.